Good afternoon, I'm Tyler Field, Vice President of Wine and Spirits for your Morton's The Steakhouse. As you know, working at Morton's, we love to give our guests the best of everything the world has to offer, especially in the wines. And we also change our wines up every 6 months, as you know. So what I have here, I thought I'd take some time on video to walk through 13 new and exciting wines that you're going to see in your restaurants in November, and give you a little information on these wines themselves, so you're better apt to be able to explain them, get excited about them for our guests. So how I lined up the wines are by body style. So I have the lightest style wines here, all the way through to very heavy bodied wines. And as we all know, when we're suggesting wines to our guests, you want to have the lighter style wines go with lighter foods. So we have more whites here, which are going to be with the shrimp cocktails, crab meat cocktail, oysters, things like that, all the way through to the red wines, which we all know go very, very well with steak pairings. However, there are differences in body styles between white wines as well as red wines, so we're going to take a few minutes today to go through them. So we'll start down here with something our guests love very much. It's called Moscato, and Moscato is an Italian grape from Italy that gives that kind of sweet, more sweet, aromatic flavor that our guests love both in cocktails and as an aperitif. So this one is made exclusively for our Morton's guests by the Calabria family in the Riverina region. Now Riverina, you're going, okay, that's not in Italy. Well, it's not. It's actually the largest growing region in Australia. But the Calabria family moved down there to start making wine, bringing their Italian heritage with them. So they're actually growing Moscato and making what I think is a better Moscato than I can find currently in Italy. So this is exclusive to us, will be available as a house wine as well as we'll use in some cocktails. And again, Calabria Moscato. And what you want to know about this, it is going to have some effervescence and some sparkle to it. So that only enhances the flavor profile of both sweet and floral. Again, a very light style wine. This might be good with, maybe shrimp, but again, it's going to have that sweetness. So I would always pair it with more of a spicy dish. So if there's any dishes that you're serving that have sriracha or chilies or other kind of hotter types of ingredients in the dish, you always like to balance that by offering something sweeter in style. So this would be a great selection to pair with something that has a little bit of spiciness to it. Okay, moving on. We also have our next wine here is called Pinot Gris. It's made by the Adelsheim family, which is one of the oldest families in the Willamette Valley, which is where? It's in Oregon. And again, it's not Willamette, it's Willamette. And Willamette makes three things very well: Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir. And this, I think, is the best expression of Pinot Gris in the Willamette Valley. Now, Pinot Gris, like Pinot Grigio in Italy, very, very good with fish. So this would be a great choice for sea bass. This would be a great choice for shrimp cocktail. This would be a great choice for crab cocktail. Again, very light, floral. Both of these wines, the Moscato and the Pinot Gris, see no oak. So they also don't go through what's called malolactic. So they're not creamy, they're not dense, they're not gonna just take over your whole mouth. They're meant to be paired with food and are gonna be very crisp, floral, one sweet style, and the Moscato, one dry style in the Pinot Gris. Okay? Now moving on with two wines that are actually the same grape varietal. So the first one here is Langlois Chateau. Langlois Chateau, and it is a Sancerre. Now Sancerre, as we know in the old world, isn't a varietal of wine. That's actually the town where this wine is made. And what this wine is that they make very, very well in the town of Sancerre, which is in the Loire, is Sauvignon Blanc. And so this Sauvignon Blanc, because it's an old school Sauvignon Blanc, old world Sauvignon Blanc, is going to have much more grassy and mineral textures to it versus the New World Sauvignon Blanc that's right next to it. So here's a Sauvignon Blanc from the Napa Valley made by Markham Vineyards. And what New World Sauvignon Blanc has in it is grapefruit and citrus notes. So we have grass, herbal, mineral notes here, big citrus bomb here. So the same grape varietal, but depending on what our guests' palate is like, we have two different Sauvignon Blancs to offer them. And one of the cool things to know when you're learning about wine, now you know Sancerre, well, it just means Sauvignon Blanc, but it's also the town. So, moving on from Sauvignon Blanc, well, before we move on, Sauvignon Blanc is the classic pairing is with oysters. So again, when you get a big bowl of oysters, what are some of the accompaniments? You usually get lemon, right? Because lemon's a citrus. It's going to aid in balancing the oyster itself. Well, we have citrus in the wine as well. And then we also have the minerality from the Loire Valley. And what does an oyster taste like? Lots of minerals and sea. So both of these are fantastic pairings, and that's a classic pairing to go with oysters. Moving on to the king of white wines in America, which is the Chardonnay. You might recognize this label. The brand's been around for about 5 or 6 years, and it's called Meiomi. And the actual grapes for this wine are from Monterey, Santa Barbara, and also Sonoma. So 3 kind of northern coastal places in Northern California, all producing great grapes. And so how this ties in is the word Meiomi is actually the Yucca Indians who used to live up there. It was their word. Meiomi was the word for coast. So all of these Chardonnay grapes come from coastal California and are blended using French oak as well as malolactic fermentation. And it's a fancy word, but it's basically a second fermentation that happens in wine that turns malic acid into lactic acid. And we all know lactic acid is like milk. Okay, so especially white wines go through this process, and especially in Chardonnays, you'll get that more milky, full-flavored feel on the palate than you would with a Sauvignon Blanc or a Moscato or a Pinot Gris. So this is going to stand up to much heartier foods than the other white wines. So this would be great with a chicken entree. This would be great with anything that's pork chops. Anything that's sauced with a cream sauce, the Chardonnay is going to stand up very well to it. Again, this is very popular. This is a brand our guests will recognize, and you should be able to sell a lot of it. Moving into the red wines, and this is really what, as we know, Morton's is famous for because we're a steakhouse. Starting with kind of the lighter style red wines, we're going to start with the great Pinot Noir. And one of the things, if you know a little bit about wine, Pinot Noir takes a very, very cool climate to grow in. So there are parts of Sonoma that are very cold. However, probably the best growing region for Pinot Noir in the United States is Oregon. You get very, very cool nights, and the days aren't quite as hot as in California as well, so it creates delicious Pinot Noir. Now this one here is very, very special to me. This is another exclusive that's made by myself and a fantastic winemaker from the Willamette Valley in Oregon named Sarah Cabot. The gentleman on the front is my grandfather, who was a farmer, and it's him in Steeplechase on his land in Virginia when he was a young man. And this wine was really created to celebrate the gentleman farmer taking care of the earth, and it's actually a Pinot Noir when we blended all of the items together. Sarah's Vineyards actually produce a very powerful Pinot Noir, so this is going to stand up to more than just filet. You could actually maybe go to a New York strip on this, but an amazing wine that we've named the Harrison. And again, we've made 950 cases, but it's only available to our guests at Morton's, and I really think you'll enjoy this wine. Next up on the body style chart, we're going to go to Spain. And what we have here is a Muriel, Fincas de la Vila. But Muriel is a cosecha, a winery in the Rioja part of Spain. And we know that in the Rioja part of Spain, the major red grape varietal is Tempranillo, okay? It's very, very similar to what you might know from Italy, Chianti Classico Sangiovese. Same type of grape where you're still gonna get some oak influence, but it's not gonna be a super large mouthfeel. It's going to be very subtle, and again, because it's old world, it's going to have some minerality. Now, one of the neat things about Rioja is they designate their wines based on how long the wines stay in barrel. So a Joven wine has no barrel age and comes to market right away. So it's very fruity and light. But then they have a reserva that mandates that you have to keep the wine in barrel for at least 3 years before you can release it to market. This is very rare in the New World but very common in the old world. So with this wine, what we find is this is actually a 2011. So we have some vintage depth. So if you're selling this in 2016 or 2017, our guests will kind of migrate to this because it's a little bit older, which has a different flavor profile, older wine than a new wine, and it's going to have more of those macerated flavors from being in bottle longer. So this is a very great old school, old world wine. And just if you're interested, Fincas de la Villa means the fields around the villa, so the vineyards themselves. So these are all the top vineyards from Muriel, which is the vineyard property. Moving on, we all know that beautiful grape called Merlot. We don't serve a tremendous amount of Merlots, but there is a good following of guests who like it. Merlot, as we know, is a Bordeaux grape varietal that in America has enjoyed success. We're carrying one here called Decoy, and Decoy is the second label of the Duckhorn family of Duckhorn wines. Obviously, Duckhorn created a great line of very expensive Napa Merlots, as well as Cabernets and other Bordeaux varietals, but they obviously became so popular that they sourced grapes outside of the Napa Valley to make a line called Decoy. So again, these are great values that the guests can experience. This Decoy, the grapes are sourced from Sonoma, but again, Merlot, unlike Cabernet, is going to be more plums and raspberries versus other dark fruits and chocolate would be a Cabernet. So a little lighter in style, but still a very, very big wine. And Decoy is a great selling brand, very similar to Meiomi. Our guests will know this label. Moving on from that, we're going to the beautiful Mendoza Valley in Argentina. And I was very blessed to go down and work with one of my favorite producers in Mendoza, Archibald Ferrer. They make world-class Malbecs that are the most highly rated out of any Malbecs in Argentina. And they happen to have enough juice in the 2014 vintage to be able to have me come down and make some exclusive Malbecs just for our guests at Morton's. And what we have here is something we call Los Andes, and it's very simple. It stands for the Andes Mountains. If you ever get a chance to visit Mendoza, it's surrounded by the Andes Mountains. It's like being surrounded by the Alps or being surrounded by the Rockies. It's one of the most beautiful places you can ever see, where it's hot down in the valley and you can, there's people skiing up on top of the mountains. So this is a beautiful Malbec that we made from them. Again, we were able to save on price to bring our guests a really great value by the glass. Moving on, we're going to South Australia to a AVA called McLaren Vale. And obviously we know Australia is Shiraz country, very hot climate. Shiraz does very well there. We know that Shiraz is actually the same grape varietal known in France in the Rhone as Syrah. But in Australia it's called Shiraz, and it has been forever, so it's stuck, and we're here. The D'Arenberg family has been in the McLaren Vale longer than any other family planting grapes. And there's an interesting story about this wine. They actually bought the vineyard in 1912. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Osborne. His grandson, Chester Osborne, now runs the operation. But they named the Shiraz the Footbolt. And what Footbolt stands for is before they got into the wine business, they actually owned horses for racing. And their pride stallion was a horse named Footbolt that commanded the most money. So when they decided to sell the horses, that got them the most money, so they were able to buy their vineyard they called D'Arenberg. So again, one of the best Shirazes in South Australia from the McLaren Vale, D'Arenberg Footbolt. Now, the last three wines I'm very proud of. These are all private labels that are made just for our guests for Morton's by myself and some very other talented winemakers. One of the things that's happening right now in Napa Valley, which is what our guests like to buy from, is the land is becoming so expensive that prices for Napa Valley wines are doubling and tripling every 2 or 3 years just because it's such a valuable property and valley. So one of the things that we've done to be able to still bring these to our guests, because our guests love the Napa Valley, is we go in as a winemaker would and we actually buy grapes from the best areas in the Napa Valley and create our own wine labels and our own wine, and we're able to bring it to the guest at a much more affordable price, or a price at all that you could serve wine by the glass. So we have three here. The first one is a red blend called Drama. And you know, this is called Drama because we used all the Bordeaux varietals that are out there. So we have Merlot, Petit Verdot, Malbec. It's predominantly Merlot, and it's just a playful, great red blend to sell our guests. On one note, there's also our general manager in New York City, Miss Kimberly Guerin, goes by the nickname Big Red, and the picture looks a lot like her. So if you ever get a chance to meet Kimberly, hopefully the wine is as good as she is a manager. Secondly, we have a great wine here that we source fruit from a small AVA in Napa called Rutherford. Now, if you look at Napa as a whole, there's over 20 AVAs in it, but Rutherford really commands the highest price for grapes. So you have the Tokelon Vineyard there, Mondavi's there, Franciscans there. Everyone that has something on what's called the Rutherford bench commands the highest prices for wine. We were able to get some great juice from a Beckstoffer vineyard, and we made something called Bragdon Field Reserve. And again, heavy oak fluence, heavy body style, lots of chocolate, lots of bright fruit. You're getting that Rutherford loam is the type of soil there, and this is going to be a big juicy wine. So you'd figure any other wines out of Rutherford, Quintessa, other things, $300. This wine's going to go to our guests for $75 a bottle and $15 to $16 a glass. It's an amazing value. I hope you were able to sell a lot of it. Bragdon Field are two great families in the U.S. that got together to make this one wine. And then the last wine here, there's a great new AVA up in, it's called Red Hills Lake County, which is the northern part of the Mayacamas Mountains. So it's a very high altitude new AVA wine growing region that commands amazing high prices as well. And we've made a wine here called the Gloaming. And what the gloaming means, if you're not familiar with it, it's a term used for that moment right between when it turns from dusk to dark. And one thing we know about making great wine is you have to have very hot days and very cool nights. So this is kind of the key where it all changes and snaps all the flavor in. So again, an amazing value, very large wine, Cabernet based with a little bit of Petit Verdot in it, make it sticks to your teeth a little bit, and it's got that black inky flavor. So this is also an amazing value by the bottle as well. So with that, I think you can see that we spent a lot of time and attention trying to bring our guests the best that the wine world has to offer, and I hope this gave you a little bit more information, and I enjoyed spending time with you. So with that, cheers, good luck with your guests selling these beautiful wines.